Good morning, fellow ruminators. Welcome back to another session, Rumination with Andrew. It is my distinct pleasure to be with you one more time to discuss a very important topical matter. And this morning, we are going to talk about democracy, the state of democracy in the United States of America, considered to be the exemplar of democracy in the world. Now, the fact of the matter is that we are going to look at how the Democratic Party in the United States, led by Joe Biden, right, is considering to thwart the efforts of third parties in the United States of America. And it's not just something that is said, it's something that is official, something that is on the records, and we've got to take stock. We've got to look at essentially what is happening. Let me open up with Reuters, right? The newspaper, and this Reuters is the left-wing, left-leaning newspaper. For those of you who are left-wing minded, I know that most of you are left-wing minded because we think that the United States is a progressive country, even though it is not, right? But you have to learn as you go along. Now, Reuters opens up, and this article was written on January 18th, 2024. So this article is very recent, and we've got to be mindful of what we're reading here. Now, the title of the article is Biden Allies Plot to Thwart Third-Party Bids That Threaten His Re-Election. So it means, therefore, that Biden wants to thwart any efforts by any third party to actually contend the election, because the theory is that if there's a third party, they are going to actually take some of the voters that Biden would have gotten, and which would cause him to lose the election. Notice here that we're seeing Hillary Clinton here in the background. And it's reported in another newspaper, I can't remember if it's Politico, that she was the one who suggested to him that he has to be careful of third parties. Now, the articles that I have read, they have given the history of third parties in the United States and the fact that many of them, well, they have not been a lot, but in recent history, we can think about, is it Ron Perot? Yes, I think in 1992, and that his third party stole the elections, or they are assuming, right, that they stole the elections from Bush, the father, right? That is Herbert Walker Bush. George Herbert Walker Bush. And then we had now another attempt of a third party in the 2000 election. And these political experts, right, the Democratic experts, are suggesting that Ralph Nader actually stole the election. Well, he didn't steal the election. Let me not put words in their mouth, but his third party caused some of the voters to have been diverted from Al Gore's presidential election, right? So they are assuming. Now, fast forward to 2016, when you had Hillary versus Donald Trump, and they're suggesting that Jill Steins, or Steens, is it Jill Steins? Right. Her Green Party, third party, right? So her Green Party, third party rulership or contention, political contention, actually caused some voters to have diverted their votes from Hillary to her camp, right? So that is what they're suggesting. So they're now clamping down on any formation of any third party in the United States. And my question is this the democracy of which Abraham Lincoln talked about? Is it that right now we can see, or we are witnessing, the rise of the elite mob? And I did encourage you to watch that video. Many of you have not watched that video, but that's a very, very important video to watch, right? So you can look at my channel and you can see the video. I think just 4 of you have watched that, just seen 4 views. One of the things about people I've seen here is that you just love gossips, you love entertainment, you're not looking at content which is very necessary for you to see. And the rise of the elite mob is something very necessary, right? You are more interested in talking about celebrities. and viewing what people have to say about celebrities and what they do and what they're not doing. And you're not concerned about what is happening, what your political leaders are doing behind the scenes, right? Which will impact you negatively. All right. And I say that negatively, you will be impacted negatively because when you think about the fact that they're saying that they're thwarting a third party contention of the election, right? It means, therefore, that you are not taking stock. You're not seeing, you're not discerning that very soon you will not participate in any elections whatsoever, right? Because it's going to be a reigning monarchy. So you have to take stock. Let me share my screen now, and we are going to look at the content, some of the content, I should say, of Reuters here. Now, this is it. So this is an article by Reuters. And it says that American Bridge is the Democratic Party's primary opposition research organizations spending tens of millions of dollars to track Republican rivals and produce attack ads, right? So that's what they're going to do. But in 2024, the deep-pocketed ally of President Joe Biden is adding a new role that could help shape the November 5 presidential election third-party suppressor. So they're about to suppress any third-party formation. Worried that third-party bids from a centrist group called No Labels and anti-vaccine activist Robert F. Kennedy could siphon off votes from Biden in key states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Arizona. American Bridge has hired prominent election attorney Mark Elias to help thwart these outsider bids, among other things. So they have hired a lawyer to prevent any contestation to the Joe Biden's election or to having him being elected as president of the United States. Now, my question is, what type of democracy is this? And I dare say this is an elite democracy. And for that reason, again, I entitled my video that I uploaded some days ago, The Rise of the Elite Mob. And you need to view that and share that videos with others so that they can understand what we mean by the elite mobs, because it's going to be democracy run by the elites. They have always been running the democracy that we call democracy, or that we have not been taking stock. But right now, the emperor is without clothes. And that is what we need to understand. The emperor has decided that he's no longer going to wear clothes because he doesn't have to. Because if anyone should resist, then all you have to say that these people are deplorables, as Hillary Clinton called the people who voted for Donald Trump in 2016, right? She's on record saying that they are deplorables because they did not agree with her policies. Now, a central tactic employed, flagging technical issues or starting a legal challenge as third-party candidates navigate a patchwork of laws of get on state ballots. We're keeping an eye out to make sure they're dotting all their I's and crossing all their T's. And we're not ruling out legal action with our attorneys if we identify a problem. And that applies for all third-party threats to President Biden. Pat Dennis, president of the American Bridge Group, said in a statement to Reuters. So these people are serious and they're not playing games. You are the ones who are playing games here, right? Because they're not playing games. They are very, very certain and they are aware of what they want to accomplish. They are aware of what the agenda is. You are the ones out there who are not aware of what the agenda is, because you still continue blindly and uncritically to think that you are living in a democracy. And you wake up every morning listening to the news on CNN and Fox and MSNBCs, and you think that you are hearing gospel. Because you think that, yeah, the journalists are trained and they went to Ivy League schools and they're making millions of dollars, so they are obligated to telling you the truth. When they think, well, they're not as intelligent as you think they are, right? Because they are puppets of the government and they're just telling you what they have been told to tell you, okay? Now, other Biden allies have also launched a multi-pronged assault to starve third-party candidates of financial and political support. Now, this is very serious now. What type of democracy are we living in when we allow this to happen? So you are going to starve them of any financial support, which means, therefore, you're going to blackmail them. That's the only way it can be done. In addition to trying to keep them off state ballots, they say they are adding donors, they're asking donors rather, not to send them money and warning potential candidates to stay on the sidelines, according to interviews with groups involved in the efforts. Right? No Labels filed a complaint, or filed rather, a complaint with the U.S. Department of Justice, alleging those efforts represent an illegal conspiracy to use intimidation, harassment, and fear against supporters and donors. Dan Webb, a former U.S. attorney and No Labels leader, announced on Thursday. Now, I'm going to stop here and look at another article from the Politico, and I like this. I prefer this font and also this stat. The other one was so pale I could hardly see what they were saying. Now, here we have from the Politico an article that was written, and let me see the date on which this article was published. All right, so we have here the 10th of the 6th, 2023. So that was, I think, October 6th, 2023. So that was also not a very long article. It's a fairly recent article, right? Not an article that was written a long time ago. And this article was written by Jonathan Lemire, or Lee Meyer. Now, LinkedIn co-founder Reid Hoffman convened a Zoom call with 30 other like-minded donors this week to address a persistent fear among national Democrats, third-party candidates who could undercut Joe Biden's campaign. This is coming from the Politico, so the same thing that Reuters reported, we're hearing the same thing from the Politico newspaper. In particular, these donors on the line were worried about No Labels, a group that said it has raised millions to gain access to the ballot in at least 10 states for potential presidential candidates. Hoffman and Matt Bennett, co-founder of the centrist organization Third Party, argued during the meeting that not only is a third-party victory implausible, but that independent candidates would inevitably hurt Biden, said one participant on the call, granted anonymity to discuss the issue candidly. Right? So they're suggesting here, it's very clear that a third-party rival would be dangerous or would hurt the prospects of Joe Biden winning the election. Now, what if Joe Biden loses the election? Because that's the will of the people. Isn't that the purpose of democracy? Should there be interference? Isn't that what we call election interference, of which they accused Donald Trump? I would like to ask you that question. Because they're accusing Donald Trump. We don't know if what they say is true, might be true, might not be true. That he wanted to rule the election results that they had in 2020. And, reinstall himself as president of the United States. He wanted a second term in office, right? Now, if that happened, and we're now seeing, well, the Democrats actually accuse them and say that they are a threat, that the Republicans, particularly under Donald Trump's leadership, is a threat to democracy, is an existential threat to democracy, as they say, right? Now, if Donald Trump is an existential threat to democracy, what we're seeing here by the Democratic Party is also another existential threat to democracy, if truth be told, right? Because that is what they're doing. They're, in other words, intimating that the people are not intelligent enough to choose the candidate that they desire to run the country. Because they want Joe Biden, because from their perspective, he is the best candidate. He represents the values, right, of American democracy, whatever that means, right? If it is, I don't think that democracy is a government of and for and by the people. It's my opinion. I don't know what opinion you might have. Hoffman has contributed 1.5 million to help with legal and political efforts to stop no labels. But he and Bennett asked donors to pony up more, aiming to raise 3 million to 4 million total, the meeting participant said. So even LinkedIn is joining in this campaign, right? And LinkedIn is another big tech, right? A part of the big tech industry in the United States. Now, it's very, very clear to me that something here is amiss. Something here does not smell right, and Americans should take stock, because you're going to vote and you think that your vote counts. You think that you are determining the destiny of that country. That's what you thought, or perhaps that's what you still think. But I hope that you understand that you might not be controlling the destiny of that country. And perhaps never have you done so, right? But you know, many people are living in this false notion or false understanding of the world in which we live. You think that you are so important and you're living in this free society and you can do whatever you want to do. But I am telling you that that is not the case. That is not the reality, and that you are living in a self-deluded world, right? Now, Biden wins head-to-head with Trump. So as long as we can hand him that, he can win. But third-party candidates will make it very hard. So this is what Ben is saying in an interview with Politico after the Wednesday meeting. People are very focused on this threat. So the third party is a threat. Do you see what is happening here in the United States? That anything that challenges the status quo is a threat. So if you speak the truth, that is a threat to democracy. So you've got to be very careful when they talk about democracy and the threats to democracy. Are there any threats to democracy? Sure. But what are the real threats? That is what you've got to study. And if you read the book by Chalmers Johnson, The Sorrows of Empire, you will understand that he thinks that the military-industrial complex is the major threat to US democracy. And he is right. And lots of other people, other scholars have written on the matter and are in agreement with him. It's only that Chalmers Johnson is one of the big scholars out there. He's now deceased, but he wrote eloquently and lucidly about the development of this large-scale military-industrial complex and how it was going to upend America's democracy. And this is there on the internet for free. Go and read it, because you'd understand what these guys are doing behind the scenes. Those worries are shared within the Biden campaign. Among those charged with getting the president reelected, there is consensus that third-party candidate would almost certainly hurt the Democrat in the race, according to 4 Biden advisors not authorized to speak publicly about internal campaign deliberations. It's not just no labels that he has gotten their attention. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., is another potential spoiler for Biden, should he run as an independent as anticipated, along with recently named independent candidate Cornel West. So these men, right, are major threats to Joe Biden's re-election campaign. And the Democratic or segments of the Democratic Party are very, very careful, and they are trying to thwart anybody who desires to challenge Joe Biden. Remember now that RFK, that is Robert Kennedy, he wanted to run on the Democratic ticket, but the Democratic Party said no. And that is why he had to go and form a third party, or he's in a third party, he's an independent, right? And he's running as an independent candidate. So the fact of the matter is that is interesting too, that that this guy who has been a Democrat all his life, but the fact that he decided that he would write a book that did not sit well with the establishment, they decided now that he is a persona non grata. Now, I'm not sure if they are playing games here. They could, because he is a part of the elites, but the elites are also not united, right? So I have told you on many occasions that, and you've got to understand that. So it's possible that he is genuine, and he wants to overhaul the political system in the United States. One of the things I don't like about Robert F. Kennedy is the fact that he always states that he is the guy to change the system. And my argument is that no one man can change the system. No one man. Unless you're going to be an Iron Man, you're going to be a dictator. That's the only way that one man can change a system, right? Because you have checks and balances, and people are going to veto some of the things the laws that you have, made, you have written. So how are you going to change the system? You need institutions, and you need the majority in Congress to do what is in the best interest of the nation. And we know that the political system in the United States, as around the world, is controlled by private interests and vested economic interests, that you and I cannot imagine. I think it's exceedingly difficult for Trump to win a traditional campaign against Biden. So like 2016, the only path for his victory is with help from third parties and outside actors, said John Della Volpe, who polled for the Biden campaign in 2020. Right now, the group of potential independent party candidates are more likely as a group to hurt Biden than Trump. So even independents like Robert F. Kennedy cannot be allowed to contest Joe Biden's re-election efforts, right? They must be thwarted, and they must be totally put down immediately. And that is something that is interesting, because isn't that suggesting that they control the voters and how they think? And the fact of the matter, something that I find very interesting, that they are foisting two old men onto the American populace. What is the message behind that? And Joe Biden, who is not altogether mentally well, shouldn't he be saying now that this is the end of my road, my political journey, my political sojourn, I need to go home? I would think that he is a greater narcissist than Trump is, because the fact of the matter is that he has enough intelligence, he has enough mental dexterity, acuity to understand that he is not very, very well at the moment, and perhaps needs to rest, right? I think that would do him a great deal, and perhaps help him to recover faster. Now, ultimately, the White House believes that an improving economy and its record for Black voters, always using Black people, right, with symbols to be used and abused, And the Black people sometimes love to be used and abused, because only if we would educate ourselves to understand what is happening. We just tend to look at our celebrities and our political elites, that's our Black political elites, and believe that what they say is true. You followed Obama, right? Believe that Obama was going to take you to the land of milk and honey. And he didn't. He wasn't able to take you to the land of milk and honey. And you have not yet learned that lesson, right? That was the era in which you should have learned that lesson. And if you look at a video clip of an interview done with Harry Belafonte, you will see that from 2006 thereabout, when he was talking in an interview with the same Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton before Barack Obama became president, that he was saying the Democratic Party was already lost and that they were not the party that represented the interest of the working class people as they thought they did in the 1960s, because that was to something that was not genuine, just because they wanted to win the election. You must understand that parties, political parties, that is, when they want to win, they will do things that are unconventional so that they can garner the votes. But when they're in office, they do very little to fulfill the promises made and to expand on policies that they instituted, unconventional policies that they instituted before they won the elections or after winning the elections. That's what it's all about. So we've had for a long time this idea that the Democratic Party is the party of the working class. But we're seeing here that the Democratic Party is the party of the corporate elites. And you've got to understand that. And the corporate elites are not inclusive people. They don't believe in diversity, equity, and inclusion. But you think they do because they say they do, and you believe them, even though you're seeing to the contrary. And you're seeing a lot of contradictions, but you can't unravel, you can't unpack the contradictions. So you believe them and you think that, yes, we have to vote for the Democratic Party because the Republican Party is the racist party and they're going to, destroy the democratic values in America. When you don't understand, because in another newspaper I read that it's a bipartisan effort that they're trying to suppress third parties and their political rivalry to these contenders. That's Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Biden appointed both the first Black female vice president and Supreme Court justice. Symbols, right? Will blunt West's appeal, but campaign advisors acknowledge that Biden in 2020 did not turn out voters from major cities like previous Democrats, and there are worries about depressed enthusiasm next year, which is this year. The campaign is already taking steps to counteract that, mobilizing a multi-million-dollar radio buy on Black and Latino-owned radio stations to help shore up those groups earlier in the cycle. So they're going to brainwash you, right? This is about brainwashing you so that you will vote for them. And they are going to say everything that needs to be said. In fact, I was reading an article yesterday about on the same topic, and in it, they're saying that any person who challenges Joe Biden, any third party that is, who challenges, or major contender who challenges Joe Biden, they are going to, even if you were governor of a particular state, you were governor, let us say you were governor of Texas or governor of Florida, whoever you decide to be. Notice that, what's his name? Well, that's for the Republican Party. But anyone who challenges Joe Biden, they are going to go into your closet, and any skeletons you have in your closet, I missed a page here. Any skeleton that you have in your closet will be unveiled, will be revealed, and that will prevent you from contesting Joe Biden or Joe Biden's re-election campaign. Now, let me see if that was what we're reading. As for no labels, those closest to Biden believe the memory of Green Party candidate Jill Stein, whose marches in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania arguably helped Trump win in 2016, will ultimately persuade most potential third-party candidates from jumping in the race under their banner. So this is what this is the reason why what's her name? Hillary Clinton reminded Joe Biden that you have to be careful of third-party contention, right, or political rivalry, because she remembers very clearly what happened in 2016 to her. Well, this is the general assessment. We don't know if that is true, because she did get the popular votes, the majority of the popular votes. Where she lost was the in the political, what do you call it now? The college, the electoral college votes that she lost, where she lost to Donald Trump. Now, one thing that could end up aiding Democrats fearful of third-party challengers are the logistical hurdles that come with such runs. Candidates face obstacles getting on the ballots in specific states. The larger ones tend to require serious resources or grassroots support to collect the necessary signatures. That's specifically true, or especially true rather, for West and Kennedy, who are opting to run as independents just weeks before many states' balloting deadlines. Now, that is something that you need to be aware of. The Financial Times, which is not a US paper, right, has also that sort of news. I was not able to, well, I read the news on my phone yesterday, but obviously on my computer, it's not allowed me to access this article. But the title of the article is "The Biggest Risk to US Democracy." You've probably never heard of them. And the article really stated that, the journalist went to America and according to him, he spoke to clever Americans, right? Those who were very intelligent. And they were telling him that the biggest risk to US democracy really is, political rivalry of third parties. And they're contesting the election of Joe Biden and allowing Donald Trump to win, because that's the whole crux of the matter, that if you have a third party, an independent party, someone who challenges the two rivals, the Democrats and the Republicans, it means therefore that you will have votes that will be steered away from Joe Biden and he will lose to Trump. Because Trump's base, by the way, is secure. They have not budged. They are very clear that they want to vote for Donald Trump. While you have Joe Biden's base, many people are moving away from the Democratic Party, including minorities such as Latinos and Blacks and other people. And even now they're talking about Middle Easterners, right? Those who are from Iraq, Iran, particularly Iran, because now we are seeing, the ramping up of war with Iran. So the fact of the matter is that some of these voters, like who are living in Michigan, I understand, Iranians in Michigan, might not vote for Joe Biden or the Democratic Party. And this is the fear that they have. And, whether it is logical, I don't know. But this is a crux of the argument, the gist of what they are saying. Now, I saw this last night, and it says, Pelosi bashes, this is from the CBS website or CBS News. Pelosi bashes no labels as perilous to our democracy and threat to Biden. So everything, as I've said, that challenges the status quo is going to be a threat and a risk to democracy. And you've got to be very careful when these words are being used, particularly by the mainstream media. And many of you are not careful when you hear these words. You believe what they say. And you think that Trump is a narcissist and he's a threat to democracy. He is an existential threat to democracy. And he is the only one, as they are suggesting. But notice that they're calling people like Even Cornel West, he's a threat. This is a guy who is a pro-Democrat and perhaps has voted for Democrat all his life, right? Harvard, former Harvard professor, part of the elites, at least an academic elite. And he is considered, based on the definition here, a threat or risk to democracy. So when you think it's only Trump, you are understanding that anyone who challenges the status quo is a threat or is going to be a threat to democracy. And you've got to understand that. So when you're looking at Trump and all of the drama that surrounds him, you must understand that you're also an enemy. Because I'm sure that one of these days, Americans are going to understand that they have been deceived. House Speaker Emerita, right? So she's now House Speaker Emerita. Nancy Pelosi on Thursday eviscerated the centrist group No Labels and its attempt to mount a third-party presidential bid. I think, and this is now Pelosi speaking, I think that No Labels is perilous to our democracy. Perilous, what a word to use. So people like the Cornel West and the Robert F. Kennedy and anyone, the Jill Steins and anyone, just about anyone, even if you decide tomorrow that you want to run as an independent candidate, you will be considered as a perilous threat to US democracy. But listen to what she says. I'm talking too much. I say that completely without any hesitation, she said. This is about an illusion being created that's about non-partisanship and bringing people together. Pelosi made the statements at a breakfast with reporters hosted by Third Way, a centrist Democratic group that argues No Labels third-party effort will lead to another Donald Trump presidency. So they are arguing that they're doing this to protect democracy and to protect people's interest. When did you hear that last, that they wanted you to take something to protect you against a particular onslaught of disease, right? When did you hear that? Was that true? You've got to think, you've got to reflect, and you have got to connect the dots. One of the things I find about people, right, around the world in general, including in the United States, is that people suffer from amnesia. They can't remember anything that happened yesterday or last year, as a matter of fact. And the politicians know that. And that is why they continue to abuse us, because we do forget what they say and what they did in the past. And that maybe 99.9% of the times, they do not fulfill any of the promises that they make. None whatsoever. And you still vote for them. When they jeopardize the re-election of Joe Biden as president of the United States, I can no longer remain silent on them. Pelosi said. No Labels has been trying to appeal to centrist candidates from both parties at the top of the ballot across the country. The nonprofit's leaders have hinted at a possible mixed ticket. Pairing a Democrat with a Republican as running mates who can unite the country. Wow, that is interesting. That is something that one has to think carefully about. Now, a No Labels press release recently called the Trump and Biden campaigns a house of cards and said an unprecedented share of voters is seeking an alternative to the two. Based on what I've read, I understand that 6 out of 10 Americans are not comfortable with neither Donald Trump nor Joe Biden. They think, according to the poll, that Joe Biden is too old to contend for the presidency. And they think that Donald Trump is a threat to US democracy. That's not my perception, right? That's a poll that was, I forgot the name of the poll, but the poll that was taken in which they said 6 out of 10 Americans are not comfortable with the election of any of these two men, be it Donald Trump or President Joe Biden. Now, that is serious because that to me, 60% to me represent the majority. But here we're having the mob telling us, the elite mobs telling us that they cannot allow that to happen. They can allow a third party to be of any, political rivalry to contend in the upcoming election. They're not paying attention to a lot of policies, he said, but when they look up, the message has to have clarity. It's he's busy working. He's busy working, right? I could think that's Joe Biden, getting the job done, not campaigning all the time. But when he does, I think that will change. So Joe Biden is working. He's busy, right? But when he goes on the political campaign, he's going to make a difference. And he's going to ensure that he tells you everything that you want to hear. Perhaps not what you need to hear, but what you want to hear. The former House Speaker also took aim at independent candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who began his campaign as a Democrat and who hit double digits in a recent Quinnipiac University poll with 32% in a hypothetical matchup with Mr. Biden and Trump. Asked by CBS News whether she would discourage his bid for the White House, Pelosi replied that she would. I'm not in favor of a person who is an anti-vaxxer, she said. Look at his agenda, right? I'm not sure that Kennedy is an anti-vaxxer. He just presented some facts and wanted you, the electorate, right, citizens of the US and the world at large, right, because this is a world agenda, to make your decision as to whether you wanted something in your body. Now, this is very, very interesting that we should be talking about democracy at this time. Now, there is a book that is written by, and I think I need to find the page, so give me a moment, right. A book, I'm not sure if you're going to, let me stop sharing my screen with you so you can see the book that I'm going to share with you. Now, yeah, this is a book that was written by Mary A. Randall. And it says here, Taking Haiti, right? If you can get a copy of this book to read it, it will be very, very good to understand what this concept of democracy is all about in the United States, because there is a working definition of democracy in Washington, right? And there is another definition, theoretical definition in our textbooks. And we've got to be aware of that. We need to know what is the difference between the working definition in Washington and the theoretical definition in our textbook, because there is one. And for a long time, I think we, the citizens, right, the peoples of the world, have been working with what we've learned from our textbooks and not what the politicians, the working definitions that they are working with, right? So that's what we need to understand. But on page 6 of her introductory paragraph, she said something here that I think I should read from Taking Haiti, and this is found on page 6, right, of her book, Taking Haiti by Mary A. Randall. And this book really gave a historical understanding of what took place during US occupation of Haiti from 1915 to 1934, right? A very interesting, fascinating read, and one which will help you to understand the scope of the US empire. Carl von Doren, a professor of literature at Columbia University and a member of the Literary Guild's editorial board, thus praised The Magic Island as a significant work. Now, The Magic Island was a book that was written by American author about Haiti being the magical island, right? So, that is what US does. When it occupies a country, it writes about the country so that the populace, the US citizens, will think that they are doing a fantastic job, and what they highlight all the myths and the fables, right, of that particular country. Let us say they should go to Jamaica. They would talk about reggae music and Bob Marley, right? And that's, people, you know, all of the myths, the Yemen and the nonsense, the tourist sort of gimmicks, that is what they would be writing about and showing that we're just a country, no problem man country, right? And that nobody has any worries down there. In regards to Haiti, it would be about voodoo, right? And how these people are simplistic, right? And they're not as cultured and civilized as Americans are, right? And for the most part, Americans believe it, right? Don't they? In a sense, Van Doren was interested in what Benedict Anderson has called the imagined political community as the imagined political community of the nation. Sorry. He knew that literature had a crucial role to play in fostering shared mental images of the national community with which citizens identify themselves. So back then in 1915, when this was happening, could be, I think the Magic Island might have been written in the 1920s. So let us say the 1920s, if not 1919, I can't remember when it was written, but it was during the occupation of Haiti. One of the things that is very important that we understand is that at this juncture of the history, you didn't have technology as we have now, right? So you had to publish things as literature, books, right? To brainwash people. And Americans would read those books and they would say, wow, fascinating, right? Now we have what? We are bombarded with images of, what we see on our cell phones and also on our televisions. So this is a new era, and you have to understand that. So on your TikTok accounts, on your Instagram, on your Facebook, you will be bombarded with images of other countries and the images that America would like you to have. Not the ones that you should have, but the ones that they require that you have of the US empire, that it is an empire that seeks to spread democracy around the world. Now, democracy, as Mary Randolph and among others, and Chalmers Johnson have suggested, you can't have empire at home and democracy empire abroad, I beg your pardon. You can't have empire abroad and democracy at home. The two are incompatible. It's either you're going to be a democracy at home and democracy abroad. You can't have an empire abroad, and I'm repeating that, and a democracy at home. And many Americans believe that. They think that the United States being the world's superpower, the world's indispensable empire, or indispensable power, right? The word indispensable means that we cannot live without it. Without America, democracy in the world cannot be achieved. And the question is, who says that people want democracy in the world? There are people who are fine. And I'm not saying now that they shouldn't or they shouldn't aspire for democracy. But the fact of the matter is that who is America, right? To dictate to people what they should do in the confines of their own country, right? That is their right to determine what they want to do, right? Or not to do. Now, he knew that literature had a critical role to play in fostering shared mental images of the national community with which citizens identified themselves. He knew, too, that the nature of the national community had shifted at the turn of the century, that is the 20th century in which the occupation took place. At the turn of the century, US political leaders had furiously debated empire and its implication for the nation. In 1929, Van Doren, now that is a professor at Columbia University, suggested empire was no longer a matter for debate, but rather a simple fact and a point of pride. So this was from 1929, and this was a professor at the illustrious Columbia University. Right? And these elite institutions are just arms, extensions, expansion of the US military industrial complex. And some people call it the US military academic complex. Right? And you don't understand that. Empire was synonymous with American greatness. It was to be unambiguously embraced. Literature now had to do its part, right? So literature is there to indoctrinate you, to brainwash you into the belief systems, into the value system of the US military-industrial complex, right? And militarism and empire are twin. They're Siamese twins, as Chalmers Johnson suggested. Right? They are Siamese twins. You cannot separate them. You cannot separate them. Right? But while Americans were there playing video games and shopping and going to Walmarts and buying things that they do not need, militarism was happening around the world. And the empire was busily doing its job. And now it is on US soil and about to supplant the seeds of democracy. And you've got to take stock. And many of you are not taking stock. You are not paying attention. You're not reading good books so that you can discern, you can glean information that will help to empower your minds to think, and to think critically and analytically. Now, Van Doren, again, he was a professor at Columbia University, was not particularly interested in how the empire came to be. It simply was citizenship, the consciousness and imagination of the citizen had merely to catch up with the facts, right? Imagination, right? Just be imaginative, right? Yet Van Doren's approach elided the relations of power that brought the empire into being and that sustained it. As I have suggested, and as the memoirs of men like Faustin Workers confirm, the relations of power underlying empire included the violence of imperialism and the cultural process that enabled that violence, right? So the United States is a violent democracy. And, you know, I was reading this book, The Confounding Island, by Professor Orlando Patterson. And he was talking about the fact that Jamaica was this great democracy and fulfilled all the characteristics of what democracy should be. Was a thriving, that Jamaica has a thriving democracy according to the Harvard Jamaican professor, right? Or the Jamaican Harvard professor, I should say, right? And the fact of the matter, his main argument was, or the question that he was posing, is that how is it Jamaica has a thriving democracy and is so violent? And according to him, this is a problem that the major sociologists, the sociologists within his field, he's a historical, by the way, Orlando Patterson is a historical sociologist, and he has been teaching at Harvard since 1970s. I think he's still there. And he's suggesting that it is something that it's a question that they can answer. and it's something that people have to look into in terms of how can Jamaica have a thriving democracy and yet be so violent. But I'm here to say to him that America has also had a violent democracy since its inception. And Orlando Patterson is a very good historian in terms of his knowledge of history, right? And an excellent scholar. But he is sort of playing the game too, because he knows that the United States and the Western world in particular, or by extension, I should say, the Western world, Western Europe, have been violent from the day that they were founded. So I'm not sure what is this great conundrum, anything that is perplexing his mind or the minds of these scholars who are studying, deciphering how can democracy be a violent and yet be democracy, right? I don't understand that view that was purported by Orlando Patterson, right? Because America has always been violent, has always been a violent nation. That is how it has acquired its wealth, through violence. And that is what we have to understand. But we tend to sometimes look at the superficial and think that, okay, because I'm living in my neighborhood, but it's quiet, it's peaceful, it means that the United States is a peaceful country, but far from what you think. Now, let me see if I can go. When we look closely at Van Doren's cultural intervention on behalf of imperial citizenship, we begin to see how his writing helped to produce the idea of empire, even as it erased the very process of empire building. The machinery of ideological production within Van Doren's discourse was a series of dichotomies, historical, geographical, and cultural, that established a clear framework for understanding US imperialism. Now, I want to read you this paragraph because it is very important that you grasp what she's saying here. And this is a very important book. I think she put a lot of thought into this. And I thoroughly benefited when I read it. And I think I read this book twice, because that's how it was interesting, if not 3 times. Right? Because there are just so many insights that she has packed into this book. Please read it. Taking Haiti, for those of you who are readers out there, by Mary A. Render. All right? Render, sorry. Render, R-E-N-D-A. All right? So that's Taking Haiti, Military Occupation and the Culture of U.S. Imperialism by Mary A. Render. It's a book that I have not regretted reading, and every word that she has there, I embrace to them because they're true. And this is what we call scholarship, great scholarship. So everybody who writes books that I'm impressed with, people say they have written 15 books, and sometimes you barely can see what the insights they're trying to project. All right. Now, she says here, yet the people of the United States were never merely citizens of a republic. I was speaking to somebody last night, an American, and he said, when I said, I was talking to him about the whole concept that the Democratic Party is trying to block any third party's attempt to challenge Joe Biden's reelection. So when I used the word democracy, he said to me, or he attempted to correct me by saying, no, it's not democracy. It's the United States is a democratic republic. Now, yes, I've heard these terminologies and these semantics being used for a long time. So it's not a republic, it's not, yeah, it's a republic, it's not a democracy, and all of that nonsense. The United States was made to be a republic, and that is true. But the founding fathers did not accomplish that goal. And they themselves perhaps did not even know where they were leading the nation to. It was an experiment. And it was an ongoing, it was supposed to have been an ongoing experiment. Now, I had to educate him while I was talking to him that the whole concept of democracy came about during the Andrew Jackson's regime around about 1831, when he, or 33, can't remember when Andrew Jackson became president of the United States. But he was the one who gave equality to all white men, not white women now, white men in America. And that's where the concept of democratizing the electoral process came about. Because remember now that before, it was if you were going to vote, even for the so-called white population, you had to have land and some form of, I guess, assets, whatever. But he said no, he wanted to democratize. And remember now that one of the reasons why Andrew Jackson probably perhaps was led to do that was not because he was kind, or, well, we know that Andrew Jackson came from the lower class. He didn't come from the elites, right? But the fact of the matter is that he saw where there were lots of slave rebellions, and he had to be careful that the sort of angst toward the elites by Black Americans, by the slaves, would not have extended to the white population. Because if whites who were angry, if they had not gotten the franchise, right, then they perhaps would eventually join in slave rebellions and upend the elite democracy or elite Republican state that was founded by these founding fathers, right? So let's be very clear on that the United States has never been a democratic republic. It has never been. It is supposed to be the objective. It is the goal. It should have been, but it was never. Right? It was never. And then the slave rebellion took place, the greatest slave rebellion in the United States during the Civil War. And if you think that America was a republic by then, it was never. It lost that republican status, right? And eventually became a democracy, the ruling by the mob, right? By the majority mob, if you will. Because, yeah, democracy is really rulership by the mob, right? The majority counts, right? Yeah, and in many times they have no respect for minorities. On the contrary, the republic itself was, from the first, constructed out of empire. So the republic was constructed out of empire, which is true. Insofar as colonial settlement and Indian wars established its very foundation, right? The way in which the US settlers treated the Indians, right, during the Indian Wars was horrific, right? So that was also an attempt at imperialism, okay? Moreover, proponents of westward expansion championed imperialism in the 19th century before a host of negative connotations accrued to that term, right? After the Indian Wars, then we had the westward expansion. Van Doren's neat opposition between republic and empire erased all traces of empire building from the long process by which the boundaries of the nation were drawn and redrawn as the scope of federal power encompassed more and more of the North American continent. All right? So there are two phases of American imperialism. First, American was known as a continental empire. And we saw where they went there, Europeans, and they evicted and killed in a vicious manner, huge portions of the native inhabitants that occupied the United States prior to the arrival of the Europeans, right? We saw that happen. Then the westward expansion, where they took lots of states from Mexico, for example, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, right? All of those were imperial undertakings. And we've got to understand that. Okay, then we had also Hawaii, right? Guam, all of those US territories, Puerto Rico, right? That was also other manifestations of US imperialism. So often when we think about US imperialism, we think about post-World War II. But from its very inception, from the very founding of the United States, right? It has always been an empire. So let's talk about it is a democratic republic, as a lot of Republicans like to say, a lot of those on the right like to say, oh, and they, expend a lot of energy into correcting people who talk about democracy. But, words only mean something if we live these words out. They mean nothing if we don't do what we say or what these words signify. Now, so I think Van Doren's need opposition, I think I read that already. It may be worth highlighting the most glaring chronological inconsistency in Van Doren's historical opposition between the Republic of Old and the newly dawning empire of Oklahoma, New Mexico, and Arizona, which presumably Van Doren considered merely part of the Republic, were all admitted to statehood in the 20th century after the United States began to secure overseas possessions. Meanwhile, Hawaii, Guam, the Philippines, Panama, Puerto Rico, Haiti, the Virgin Islands, and other tropical acquisitions and protectorates constituted for Van Doren a new and wholly distinct empire. The question of future statehood for Hawaii or Puerto Rico was conveniently inconceivable rather, within the framework of this dichotomy. So the US has never been a democracy, right? It has never been a democracy. And that is what you have to understand, that empire and democracy cannot live on the same soil. The fact of the matter, however, it has always been able to hide it, the fact that it's not a democracy, because it was able to implement these dictatorial what should I say now, actions, policies on foreign soil. But now that we are living in this globalized world and everything, all the news is before us, the emperor is without clothes, right? We can see on our screens, people travel more and they're understanding the role that the US has played in our current dispensation. And the people, not a lot, are beginning to take stock. And they're beginning to understand that the United States of America is an empire and it's not a democracy. And right now, we're seeing where the elites are letting us know that the ordinary people, the ordinary working class, even middle class, if you will, do not have the intelligence and the wherewithal to understand what is happening in the political realm. So they will have to choose your leaders, right? Because you do not have the scholastic aptitude. You can't reason. So they have to reason for you. And many of you are sitting out there and all you can talk about is the drama that is happening between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. But you've got to look at substantive information. And maybe I should title this video, Democracy in Name or in Substance. That's what I'm going to title this video. Democracy in Name or Substance. right? Because I want to tell you that the United States democracy is a democracy in name. It's a democracy in name. It's not it's not a true or a veritable democracy. Now, I want to end here by reading something that is important from Psalm. That's from Psalm 33. And it is very important that I read to you these few verses, right? Yeah, let me get it. So let me begin from verse 8 to 12, right? So this is Psalm 33, and that's Psalm 33, and this is taken from the New International Version, right? The New International Version. And let me begin at verse 8. Let me see if I can make my screen a little bit bigger so that my eyes can read it better. All right, good. So I can see it more clearly. Now, let all the earth fear the Lord. Let all the earth, the people of the world, revere him. For he spoke, and it came to be. He commanded, and it stood firm. The Lord foils the plans of the nations. So he foils the plans of the nations. He's the one who is in control. He thwarts the purposes of the peoples. But the plans of the Lord stand firm forever. I read it again. But the plans of the Lord stand firm forever. The purposes of his heart through all generations. And I end here. Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord. The people he chose rather for his inheritance. Now, it is the Lord who raised up the United States for a particular role that he wanted her to play in this future, or in this present dispensation, I should say, right? He founded the nation. Not that he founded it for her to have exploited other people, but she chose to exploit, because God, again, I told you yesterday that God gives us freedom of will. And we have to choose our own where we would like to be. With his help, we can conquer our deficiencies. But lots of times, just like children, we don't like to ask our Heavenly Father for help. We think we can function independently of ourselves. But as the Bible says, we can do nothing of own. Now we're seeing where the United States is moving in the direction of tyranny, right? And not in the direction of democracy, of freedom. And we've got to open our eyes. Now, God is working out his purposes in all of this, and we must understand that at the end of the day, it's going to win. It might not seem like that is happening right before our eyes, but at the end of the day, God is going to win, because he is the one who sets up and he puts down. Thank you so much for joining. I hope that you will join me another time for another enlightening session. All the best to you. Bye-bye.